Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at MedComsNetworking.com. So information, resources, activities, and so on for people who work in and around the global business of medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and the associated businesses. You'll find lots of things happening at MedComsNetworking.com. You'll find at NetworkPharma TV, we've got lots of videos of recordings of webinars like this, along with other sorts of videos. And importantly, we have a lot of resource at FirstMedCommsJob.com, which is providing information for people who'd like to know more about our business. And today, following that line of thought, we've invited the guys from AMICULUM Access to join us and to talk specifically about market access and HEOR and working in that business. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Claire from AMICULUM Access.
Thanks, Peter. So yeah, as Peter mentioned, I'm Claire Woon. I lead the AMICULUM Access team at AMICULUM in general. I've got two of my colleagues with me today. I've got Pin Liu and Manca Povsic, and they're two of the consultants within the AMICULUM Access team. So without further ado, I hope you can all see the slides. So we're going to be talking to you today about what is market access, and this is specifically aimed at people that are maybe looking to get into medical communications in general and want to understand what the difference is with what we do, or those within medical communications who maybe want to see a little bit of the difference between our two areas. So why are we qualified to talk about this? So AMICULUM Access is part of the wider AMICULUM cluster of agencies. Within that cluster, you've probably met some of my colleagues who presented at a number of these webinars recently, and they cover a range of different medical communications specialisms. We are a specialist agency within that group focusing on market access. And we're going to be talking today about what market access is. So we are a full service market access agency, and we specialise in producing tailored, high quality materials for global, regional and local pharmaceutical clients. And it's really about defining the value of a product, what we do. So I've alluded to it there, but what is market access? If you Google this, you will find lots of different definitions of market access. There's no standard right answer. So the one I've gone with today is market access is the process of getting the right treatment to the right patients at the right time and at the right price. This price point at the bottom is critical to market access. We're not just focused on the clinical data. We also look at the more humanistic burden. We look at the economic data and take all those factors and roll it into the value of a product. Well, who cares about the value of a product? So we're going to talk to you more about this, but there's lots of different stakeholders, key ones being HTA bodies. Do you know of any HTA bodies? Key one, of course, being NICE. If you're in the UK, I'm sure you have heard of NICE. The tabloid papers like to make a huge fuss every time a product's approved or rejected by them, and they are effectively the gatekeepers of the NHS. As more and more expensive products have come to market in the last few years, they have been critical in managing the NHS's resources. And as such, sometimes when products have been declined, there's been a lot of noise about that. So they're kind of the sort of stakeholders we'll be talking about throughout this presentation. Now, if you've been doing a bit of reading into market access, you've probably also come across the term HEOR. And it throws up questions. Is HEOR the same as market access? Do I have to be a health economist to work within market access? The answer is no. It is a specialism, and it is a niche specialism in some ways. Health economists are specifically trained in their area, and they focus on defining the value of a product and putting a number on that, really. So you hear of things like cost per quality, ISA. Don't worry about any of those terms right now for the purpose of this presentation, just to give you a flavour of the kind of thing they do. Outcomes research is another specific area. The most famous area that you will have heard within this is real-world evidence. And what market access does is takes data from health economics, from outcomes research, as well as the clinical data, the burden, all the different aspects that you would have from the medical communication side, and rolls this into the value. So while HEOR is a separate thing, it's very, very relevant to market access because it really provides the data that backs up a lot of the arguments that we would put together. So that gives you a kind of flavour of the background. So I've kind of touched on the iceberg there. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Pin to talk to you in a bit more detail about the different stakeholders.
Thanks, Claire. So if we could put it into the simplest term, HEOR is basically one of the tools we use to establish value of a medical intervention. So but the challenge is value means different things to different stakeholders. And in market access, there are so many stakeholders there. You need a manufacturer to make the drug, for example, and then regulatory authorities to approve it, then the doctors and nurses, and of course the patient. And there's a payer. And on top of that, there's somebody like NICE, Claire just mentioned, who would advise the reimbursement of often very expensive new drugs. And so the society, I guess the society needs to make a decision overall how to distribute healthcare resources fairly, so the patients get the benefit from medical advance, but in the meantime, the manufacturers are motivated to develop the next big thing. So in this, sometimes we call a decision-making process. The manufacturer of new drugs are often doing the heavy lifting. So unsurprisingly, our clients, the medical communications agencies, clients are mainly pharmaceutical companies. On the next slide, we will have a very general summary of the different functions within a pharmaceutical companies. Our colleagues in medical communications agencies are often working closely with one of the functions that could be the medical teams, could be the marketing team, sometimes government public affairs teams. I guess one of the unique feature of working in market access is that we're not only mainly working with the market access department of the client side. We often have to interact closely with other departments, the medical teams, the government public affairs team, and of course, most of the efforts will be channeled to the sales and the marketing team. So we need to work with them as well. So that is from the client side. So from the agency perspective, or perhaps more specifically from personal perspective, from a career point of view, why do you want to consider market access within a medical communications agency? So on the next slide, we try to summarize the connections between medical communications and the market access. Of course, this is very a top line summary. Basically, if you are working on the medical communications or market access, there are some basic skills that you need to have. So basically, you are both of them require you to communicate scientifically, concisely, and convincingly to the point to your target audience. It is just that the market access, within market access, we have a very specific goal, as Claire mentioned earlier, that is to enable the access of new treatment to patients without disrupting the sustainability of the whole healthcare system. And in doing that, we often need to dealing with a lot of different stakeholders. So I guess from a career point of view, you need to ask yourself, am I interested or even better, passionate about the allocation of healthcare resources, the fair distribution of the healthcare resources? And am I interested or excited when we have to dealing with different stakeholders in different settings? So if the answer to both questions is yes, then you will be a very good candidate working in market access. And you were pleased to here that although there's some specialist skills and experience needed in this, they're not. We're not talking about hardcore mathematics or statistics. So you don't have to be a master statistician before working on market access communications. The skills and experience you really need are really in the area of, for example, identify different stakeholders in a particular healthcare setting. So for example, Europe and Asia is very different, and try to understand the value from their perspective. And then the ability to identify evidence, or at least identify the gaps in evidence to support value propositions relevant to that healthcare setting. And of course, some knowledge about HTA systems, and you will learn that it is very fragmented. So that's why it is sometimes very complicated and challenging, but also very exciting. So with those specialist skills and experience, we are able to provide a lot of support to our client. And my colleague Manca will discuss those interesting details with you.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. So you've heard from Claire and Pin a little bit about what market access is, how it intersects with MedComms, and what kind of skills you need to get into it. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about what kind of projects we do, what we do in our day-to-day life, and I'll talk you through a case study of a project that we finished recently. So market access is a big, complex process. It spans practically the entire life cycle of a new drug. So there's a lot of different projects, a lot of different work that goes into it. We divide the work that we do into 4 sort of buckets. If you Google those buckets, every market access agency is going to define them slightly differently. But we define them as landscaping, evidence synthesis, pricing and reimbursement, and value communications. So I'll briefly tell you what I mean by those buckets. So the landscaping section is really where our clients come to us first. They're in a new disease area, in a new drug or a new mode of action, and they don't really know the landscape. So they come to us for answers to questions such as what's the burden, who are the patients, what's the unmet need, who are the stakeholders, what are the competitors doing in that landscape. And after that's established, usually moves on to some sort of evidence generation or evidence synthesis. So on top of clinical trials that our pharma clients develop themselves, there's other bits of evidence that they need, for instance, literature reviews, modeling, cost effectiveness models. I'm sure you've heard of real world observational studies that contrast the data that you get in clinical trials, and then a bunch of other statistical comparisons that can be done. So AMICULUM Access really only works in the literature review space here. We're a small team. We don't have any health economists. So what we do is we take the models developed by other people or by our clients. We take the real world data and we write about it. In terms of pricing reimbursement, we do quite a lot of work in this area. So I think we have about 3 projects going on in the minute that are specifically looking at getting a product approved through NICE and through the Scottish HTA agency. So we develop all of the submission documents for our clients. We do all the landscaping and all the submission planning for them. But we also do work that's a little bit more strategic. So we look at their pricing differentiations, scenario planning to see what kind of price point they can apply for in different countries. And the last bucket, the value communications, that is really where we spend the majority of our time in. As Pin has mentioned, value is a big thing in market access, and defining the value to the right stakeholder at the right time is the majority of the work that we do. So we do anything from a value strategy, which is where we work with our clients to decide what exactly we want to say about a drug, how are we going to say it, what kind of evidence do we need, and how do we go about it. Once that's decided, we can work on a value story or a proposition where we develop specific messages that we're going to say about the clinical effectiveness, quality of life, what's the cost going to be, and what exactly we're going to use to support those messages, excuse me. So those messages can then be distributed across the entire client teams, across all of their different teams in different countries. And that, of course, means that they need to be trained and the data that they get need to be localized, which is another thing that we do a lot of in Access. And of course, in value communications, we do a lot of publications work as well. So manuscripts, posters, abstracts, conferences, symposia, you name it. So that's a little bit about the project types. If that's not 100% clear to you, don't panic. This next slide hopefully is going to give you a little bit more of an idea of what we do day to day. If you've done any kind of medical writing or scientific writing, or have done a PhD or a master's, hopefully the activities on this slide will be somewhat familiar to you. So the majority of the things that we do is medical writing and desk research. All of the work that we do is to support some sort of written deliverable, whether that's a manuscript, whether that's a review, a strategic document, a slide deck, interviews, anything like that. All of that is underpinned by scientific writing, data analysis, and thinking about how we can inform the access of a product by what we do. So you'll see the activities are hopefully familiar. How these differ or how they are similar to medical communications activities, I would say if you're a medical communications writer, you'd probably be doing the exact same activities. However, the difference is in MedComms, you might be working on one of these activities. So for instance, you might be working on the publication strategy for the next 3 years, and that's going to be a very long project. You'll be writing manuscripts, posters, abstracts, and that's what you'll be doing. Whereas in market access, we work on all of these different activities. So you'd be writing a publication for one client, you'd be developing training materials for another, you'd be working across different therapy areas, across different drugs. So that's a little bit about how market access and MedComms differ or how they are similar. And that's really all of the new stuff we wanted to tell you today. The only thing that we wanted to go through is the case study now. So this is going to give you a little bit of an idea of what kind of work we actually do, how does that apply to real life, and what are some of the challenges surrounding that. So this case study is from a client who came to us and they asked the question of what is the likely reimbursement pathway across several European markets for our product. So this client was a very small rare disease company, and they were launching a product in a very rare bone disease in children. So as you can imagine, being a rare disease, it didn't have any other treatments. It was in children, so it was a very high unmet need, a very high burden disease area. So this drug that they were launching was very highly anticipated. However, because they were a small company, they've never launched a product before. This was their only product. They've developed it, and they needed help to get it reimbursed, to get it approved in Europe. They didn't have a market access team. In fact, the client was their market access team. So as you can imagine, she didn't have the resources or the time to do this herself. So what they were really looking for is, for our drug, what kind of pathways do we need to go down? What do we need to think about? And how do we achieve reimbursement? So on the next slide, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the approach that we took. So maybe you are already thinking about it, but obviously the first step was do some research. We did a lot of desk research for this. So every European country has its own reimbursement agency, and every agency has a set number of pathways that you can go down depending on what kind of product you're trying to get onto the market. So the first thing we did was we did desk research, and we mapped out all of the official routes that our client could take based on the type of product they have. So rare diseases products usually have their own pathways, but they're not always the quickest ones. So we wanted to map out all of the different routes available for our client and what kind of evidence they would need to do those routes. Next, we plotted a timeline for each of these pathways to show our company or show our client when they would need to interact with the reimbursement agency, who they would need to interact with, is there an opportunity for early engagement, is that beneficial or not, etc. And lastly, to sort of really hammer down on what is the best pathway and what is the worst pathway, we looked at 3 analogs. So these were 3 products in the rare disease space that were similar to our product. Obviously, there was no other product available in that particular disease, but we looked at the mode of action, we looked at the population, and we looked at the route to market that it was taking. And we picked 3 analogs that we could look at and see what they did, what pathway did they take, how successful were they, how long did it take, and did those products actually make it to the patients. So once we did all those 3 things, we then detailed a list of recommendations to our client that really simply showed what's the preferred way, what are the risks, what are the challenges, what kind of hurdles they'll be likely to find. So on the next slide, you can see an example of what the slides looked like. I think at the end we had over 200 slides, so it was a big slide deck. But as you can see, it detailed all of the routes, all of the decision trees that they were likely to face, all of the different touch points that the analog products had with the reimbursement agencies and what came out of that. So it was really detailed. The client was able to distribute this to their local teams in these European markets, and they were able to be much better placed to make that decision on what kind of reimbursement pathway they're going to take. And really, interestingly, they were able to make an immediate adjustment to one of their clinical trials. So they modified an outcome in a clinical trial that they were planning based on the research that we did, because they knew that most of these reimbursement agencies were looking for a specific outcome. So that would help them get reimbursement. So that is the case study. Hopefully that was interesting to you guys. I think we now have a few minutes for questions and discussion.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you very much. If we lose the slides, but thank you. That was great setting us up like that. And I like these sorts of chats because I hate that what I'm going to say now, but it's like, and then people will be watching this, they'll watch some of the other webinars things. There's a sort of, traditional MedComms core type activity. And then there's your sort of work, which is a little bit different, and some of what you were describing there with the case history is really very different from the way people would typically think about MedComms. And we're not in silos and things, and we've got to be very careful because people define things in different ways. But I love having chats like this that open people's eyes to the broader perspectives of what we can do in and around our business. So thank you very much. I thought that was very good. I am going to put you all on the spot now, though. Because I think it'd be interesting to do it, bearing in mind the context of this, and we're talking to people who are interested in coming to the business. But you haven't said much about yourselves, and I'm going to put you all on the spot and ask you each to spend a minute or two just talking a bit about your backgrounds, because I think you've got some interesting backgrounds there. So I'm going to pick and choose as I'm going around my screen. Sorry, this wasn't pre-prepared. Okay, but Claire, lead the way. Tell us a bit about your background, how you got into what you're doing now.
So I did a chemistry degree, then I did a chemical engineering PhD. So, and then I decided I didn't really like being in a lab and I wasn't really sure what to do, the standard MedComms route. And then I started applying for jobs, and I applied for some MedComms jobs, and I happened to apply for a market access job as well. Went along to the interview, still not really 100% knowing what it was. I'm not going to lie. I'd like to claim I'd done great research and all the rest of it. I hadn't. chatted to them, really liked the idea of what it was, did more reading around it, got the job, and haven't looked back since, to be honest. Personally, I really enjoy the mix of, obviously I've got a slightly more mathsy background perhaps than some, and I really enjoy that mix in with the writing side of things. So I kind of accidentally found my perfect career.
Great, and you have a chemical engineering background, which sort of stands out as being a little bit different sort of thing. I mean, you know, there's a lot of chat. We're bound to get some questions about what the backgrounds are needed and so on. So let's just reflect slightly on the background, how relevant it is, how important is, for instance, you know, a PhD in life science to what you're doing, sort of thing. Because we're going to just cover off some of the questions that inevitably can come off if you can just talk a bit, and then I'm going to put the other two on the spot as well.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. And in some ways, I do have to sometimes do a bit more background reading on some of the more sort of biology focused things. At the level I am now with the more consultancy stuff, it doesn't cause me a problem. I know enough, I've got a strong enough background. I think having done a PhD helps. It helps from the angle of having been to congresses, having written publications, having written posters. It gives you that kind of broader skill set, and also although it was chemical engineering, it was pharmaceutically sponsored, so I'd done a placement year within a pharmaceutical company, so I had a sense, although I was at the other end of the product life cycle, it was more around formulation. I had a sense of where it was going, and that's why I found market access really interesting, because having worked even in that enormous company formulating drugs, no one ever mentioned that someone was going to have to pay for this one day. It almost was irrelevant to those teams. So I found it fascinating that there was this whole other end of the cycle where actually there was some really interesting, exciting things going on beyond the sort of pure science.
Okay, no, that's cool. That's great. So that's fantastic. So Pin, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit there. So because again, you've got quite an interesting background there and sort of array of activities you've been involved in. So tell us a little bit about your entry and your journey to where you are at the moment.
Well, I come from an academic background as well. So I did my PhD in cell and developmental biology, and then worked as a postdoc in two UK universities. But I found that probably belatedly find that it's kind of a dead end career path. I did some other things, so I entered journalism here as well. So finding out medical communications it was purely by chance as well. But once I kind of been told that there's such industry called medical communications, I did some research myself, and somehow kind of instantly I find market access is something most fascinating. I can't figure out what's the reason for that, but it seems to become the perfect fit. So, and I mentioned that the skills and experiences, all my skills and experiences are learned from on the job, really. About kind of whether PhD is important, I don't think it's necessary. You need that. But for me, one thing is that I kind of have the respect for research, for researchers. So I understand how difficult, how much effort you have to invest to come up with something kind of meaningful. So behind the drugs, behind all the evidence, there's a huge, numerous amount of people working on that. So I have a high respect for them. So it's kind of become part of a motivation that you need to communicate the results clearly and do justice to them.
Excellent. Okay, and just to be clear, Pin, you came straight into market access, essentially, didn't you?
Yes.
And you've worked in market access. That's absolutely fantastic. Manca, go on, same question to you. Give us a bit of a sense of your journey.
So I did a PhD, I did a degree in genetics and then a PhD in biotechnology. So that was 4 years of my life in a lab that at the end I was like, no more, please. So I was looking for other jobs. I really enjoyed scientific writing, stumbled across MedComms, applied for a couple of jobs. One of them happened to be market access, and it seemed like the most interesting one. So I went into it. As Claire said, didn't really know what it was at the beginning, but I really found it interesting that there's this whole other side to drugs, other than just clinical trials and data. There's also this whole other side that's a little bit more strategic, a little bit more creative. And yeah, I've been in it ever since.
Excellent. Okay, so and just a prod to the audience here. So you've got a couple of text boxes there. Do throw some questions and comments at us, and we'll wave those into the conversation. But I think we covered off some interesting points there, and maybe just covered cleared a couple of questions out of the way. But just to pin it, just to make it a little bit more whatever. You're all sitting there as PhD backgrounds and so on, but the basic message would be you don't necessarily need a PhD to come into this business, but there are certainly some advantages. You've picked up some very good skills and transferable skills and so on along the way, sort of thing. Yeah. But I suppose I'm going to now, again, I'm putting you on the spot here, aren't I? But that's part of the fun of winging it. So you've all worked basically within market access, and let's just make the point, you've all three of you have worked in different companies as well, so you've got a breadth of experience there. You're working in AMICULUM, which is a family of agencies where they cover off lots of different so on. So I suppose if someone's looking at this and thinking, I want to get into medical writing, medical communications, market access sounding interesting, but why would somebody go into market access as opposed to a different sort of medical communications or a more traditional sort of medical education? And when you and maybe Claire, I'll start with you. I mean, you must be interviewing people. When people are coming to you, what are you looking for that makes that person more appropriate for market access versus something else? Or am I talking rubbish? Is it just much more random than that? Just reflect on that a little bit.
I think people on the whole in medical communications, this is quite a sweeping statement, but in a lot of medical communications teams, you work on one product. You become an expert in that drug, that therapy area. You're literally, you know everything about it. We don't often get to that point. We have a project on a product. Sometimes we do have a portfolio, but usually it's like, so we have to work on multiple different therapy areas, drugs. And I think people either love that, and they really like the mix and the sort of getting up to speed on different things all the time, or they really want to be very, very good at one thing and know all about it. So there's a slightly different mentality there. And some people can do both. It's not that you should be, you've got to do one or the other kind of thing. And there are probably MedComms jobs where you do a wider range of therapy areas, but in market access, it's very rare you would only work on one product. I don't think at any agency that really happens.
It's interesting, and I'm not going to sit here and disagree with you, other than to put a slightly different point of view. I mean, you're sitting there within a family of agencies and so on that work in MedComms, and I would have thought one of the things that often comes through when we talk to people who are working in MedComms is the variety is there, and that they do tend to work in different sort of areas and on different sorts of projects. So I'm interested to hear you saying that from your position, that you see that as a particular point about what you do. But just bringing Manca, just bring you in on the same sort of question. You said you were given some options. I know some of this is just random, okay? I'm just trying to help people get an insight into this. Was there something that you could put your finger on that was a little bit more interesting about this sort of work? I don't know what it could be.
Maybe you'll disagree with it, but it was the variety of work, and it was what's the word I'm looking for? I like always being challenged. I like working on different things at the same time, sort of getting up to speed on one thing, getting up to speed on another, working on a slide deck one day, working on strategy the other day. And I don't think that was there in MedComms, at least the roles that I was applying.
Very interesting, because I'm imagining there's a couple of people in the audience who are shouting out at the moment because they're doing lots of different things. So one day I might bring you back with some of your colleagues in other sorts of MedComms roles and go, let's have a fight. But so I just find that interesting. But one of the points I think when we're talking about this sort of area to make, which you did make, is you don't have to be a health economist. You're not, it's not just all about that sort of thing. So that's maybe just an important point to clarify. We've got a couple of questions coming in about career progression. I mean, some of this list, I think what you did there was a great introduction to market access and so on, and maybe we'll come back to some of that if anyone's got some questions. But let's talk about some general principles here in terms of careers, getting in and progressing. So there's a couple of questions come in about career progression, training, and so on. So again, Claire, it looks like you want to kick off, but talk a little bit about, give people a sense of that aspect of it. What's What's going to happen when they come into the business?
So I'm just looking at the questions. So do we mean the sort of entry routes into market access versus MedComms?
I was looking at the career progression. How does the career progression look in?
Career progression. Yeah, sorry.
Just take that one and go with that one for.
Yeah, I mean, one thing in market access, again, this probably isn't true in every single agency, is we don't have a sort of commercial and an editorial team in those kind of two separate buckets. We do a bit more of everything. I think it's standard across most agencies. I mean, both myself and Manca, the agencies we came from, this was what happened. You started as a writer, you trained as a writer, you became a senior writer. You then started having more client relationship management, and you'd almost move into a slightly more commercial role, but you would be reviewing and that side of thing as well. So there's as many opportunities for career progression as there are in MedComms. I don't think there's any difference in that respect. If you're good and you're ambitious and you want to do things, you will progress. But that progression can look slightly different in market access roles, and you might end up doing more sort of client relationship management rather than sort of staying almost perhaps behind the scenes slightly more, as maybe in some medical communications agencies or on some projects you might do. So it sort of leads you through to a very sort of client-facing role on the whole, progression in market access. I'm saying this as in general. There's someone in our team who isn't so keen on that side of things, wants to stay a writer, but wants to sort of step up in that, and that's absolutely fine. So there's lots of different routes, and I mean, you're probably aware it's one of the things AMICULUM sort of pride ourselves on, is giving people different opportunities that match their skill set and what they want. But yes, I would say market access, there's definitely a slightly different route through if you want it. You're less sort of segregated into the sort of editorial or commercial. Equally, I know people in MedComms that have done both, but
yeah, and again, I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay, and again, let's be very clear on this, because I'm smiling and we're all smiling slightly at each other. I mean, we're trying to give people a sense of these sort of opportunities and so on. It's very difficult. These conversations can be, because people want a sort of want to put people in boxes, and it doesn't sort of really work. But talking to you and listening to you talk hopefully gives people some insights into how various those positions can be and what those opportunities are. And yes, you've all got experience in other companies, but you are all here from AMICULUM, so there will be other types of scenarios and other types of agencies and so on. So that's just worth making that point. Pin, have you got a comment on that sort of career progression? What's the training like? That sort of aspect.
I think there's perhaps a slight difference from my limited experience, of course, that because we are AMICULUM is a medical communications agency. We are the access team within medical communication agencies, and there are other kind of type of organizational structure. So if a kind of a big consulting company, they may have a team doing similar market access communication job. So the whole setup might be different. I think within MedComms, we are all kind of encouraged to work beyond the deliverables. So we always ask questions to the clients: why do you want to do this? What else we can help to achieve your actual objective? But if you go to a consulting company, because they have a strong kind of a data generation department, etc., so it perhaps, maybe I'm not fair to them, there could be kind of the roles of people maybe too well defined. So there are people doing data kind of crunching, and there are people doing writing. So don't cross your line. There are other people doing their job. So they may be different structures. But I think within a MedComms agency, I think it will be perhaps you can achieve the best of the two worlds.
Okay. Go on, Manca, I'm going to put you on the spot with this question that's coming from Christy then. What aspects of the role do you find most challenging? Let's change the nature of the question a little bit.
So I would say the most challenging cog is definitely the clients. As I'm sure in every client-facing role, it is the most challenging thing is everyone wants something different. You need to make sure that you're giving them what they want, but that you're also challenging them in the right way, making them think about, is this really what I want? Can we do it slightly differently? And having that sort of, I guess, the knowledge, the experience, as well as the drive to have those conversations.
Okay, all right. Has anyone got an answer to that question as well? Claire, have you got what do you find most challenging?
Thinking it's a slightly different angle to come at it from, but compared to medical communications, market access has more challenges around sort of business development. So in MedComms, obviously it's still hard to do business development. It's obviously a challenge and all the rest of it, but you'd win obviously sometimes £1 million account, something like that. You know what you're doing for an X amount of time. Market access, usually you win project by project, and clients put projects out to pitch project by project. So you're constantly in that cycle of trying to win the next thing. And it can be really exciting. Like, it's great trying to sort of like see what's happening next and all the rest of it. But it can equally be quite a big challenge, especially as you imagine if you're very busy on a project for a while, the business development might not happen quite so much. You might not be putting yourself out there with new clients. So then you have to kind of then backpedal to do that business development to make sure you've got projects for the team to work on. So evening out that sort of boom and bust cycle is true across all market access agencies that I've come across. And it's something that's challenging but exciting.
Okay. Just so we're going to run out of time. So just to wrap this up, maybe we should just wrap this up. And again, I'm going to try and put you each on the spot if you've got an answer for this one. If you're faced, and we are, there are people watching this who are thinking about coming into business, have you got just a tip or two that you can throw at them and go, this would be good if you can get it on your CV, or this would be some good experience to get if you're heading in our direction? You've got an answer to that, Claire?
If you're interested in market access, things like NICE meetings are open to the public. Book yourself on one, have a look, see what the discussions are about, see if it really does interest you and excite you. It's just something, it's free, it's easy to do, give you a real flavour of the industry.
Oh, excellent idea. Pin, go on. Have you got something that you could offer as a tip?
Yeah, my advice would be similar to Claire's, really. Just pick up a case, a drug you care about, a disease you care about, and see how the patients get benefit or not in the UK or versus Europe and the US, and to see what's the reason behind, and see whether that will make you exciting, or you want to get into this business. Yes. Okay.
All right. Go on, Manca. Final word to you.
I think in terms of the things that would grab my attention on a CV, I think demonstrating that you're good at writing is definitely one of the things. Demonstrating as far as you can that you are analytical, that you can think for yourself, that you are inquisitive, that you have a passion for this area is all something that is going to get you hired.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Look, I think we draw the line there, but thank you very much, because I think that was extremely useful. And I will just make a very clear comment here. I know I can say on all your behalves, you're very happy to hear from people. Part of the point of these webinars is making connections, and I'd encourage anyone that's watching this to reach out to you on LinkedIn is the easy way, and to pick up any questions that we haven't covered. So thank you very much. On that note, I'm going to say thank you very much to you. Thanks to the audience who's here today, and wish you all luck. If you want to know more about what I'm doing, medcommsnetworking.com is the place to go. And so on that note, I wish you all the very best, and I'm going to close the recording, and we're all going to give you a little wave. So bye-bye. Cheers. Take care.